Hi everyone, and welcome back to the second part of my forecast. For those who are joining on YouTube, welcome to the cosmic calendar. Essentially, we're going to be looking at the cosmic weather between 25th of September at the Libra New Moon and 9th of October. So, interesting time. There's a lot of kind of changing of direction of planets, planets moving in and out of signs. So let's dive in and see what we've got to look forward to between now and the full moon on the 9th. So beginning in September, with the new moon in Libra on the 25th, you can see on the day itself not much happening, but just before it there's quite a lot of activity. So on the 23rd, we've got Mercury re-entering Virgo because it's retrograde, followed by the Sun moving into Libra. So this is the beginning of the Equinox and the beginning of Libra season. So just for a recap, this is kind of like where the mood or the sort of our consciousness shifts to things like diplomacy, peacekeeping, harmony, beauty, symmetry, equality, reciprocity, that kind of thing. We might also start to feel a little bit more sociable, and that's certainly a theme that seems to be highlighted by the new moon, with its emphasis on Venus and Mercury. And you can see that the Sun on the same day makes a conjunction to Mercury, so a cazimi. We then move into slightly more tricky energy on the 24th with the Venus-Neptune opposition. And, you know, I did go over this last time, but needless to say, it happens the day before this this new moon in Libra. And, of course, Venus rules the sign of Libra, so it's hard to kind of get away from. And these two planets will still very much be in orb. So this can, as I say, it can lead to sort of like misunderstandings, mix-ups. You know, this is kind of the course of true love never did run smooth kind of energy, sort of a Shakespearean tragicomedy, if you like, where we may sort of like not be in the best place to make decisions based on our values, or you know, on sort of on what we really feel kind of like. We may not be true to ourselves. We may tend to sort of like betray ourselves, abandon ourselves, or just not see things very clearly. It's very easy to be sort of taken in right now. You know, Neptune, when it's negatively aspected, can lead to deception, trickery, and that can also include self-deception. So there can be the sense of like being a little bit delusional, or just not seeing things maybe as clearly as we sort of we should. I mean, luckily Venus will still be in Virgo, which is quite discerning and is quite good at sort of seeing the facts and kind of drilling down to brass tacks, if you like, so that we tend to err on the side of what's healthy rather than necessarily what is hedonistic. And certainly Neptune in Pisces can encourage in us escapism, you know, whether it's kind of through numbing out, whether it's through drugs, you know, gaming too much, partying too much, that kind of thing. So there will be quite a pull, I think, in those two directions, and this will feed into the energy of the new moon. But you know, if you are a subscriber, you will know that there are definitely hopeful aspects to this particular new moon, which I get into in more detail. So if you want access to that forecast, then head to astrologysphere.com/subscribe and just sign up. But then the next day, you know, things move in a slightly more positive direction. And again, this energy is also active at the new moon. So first of all, we've got the Sun making an opposition to Jupiter. So this is kind of the Aries Libra polarity, and it can lead to like standoffs or like ego conflicts where people have kind of like a clash of opinions. You know, if the Sun kind of rules our consciousness, our ego, Jupiter can be about our beliefs, and the way that we sort of view the world. So there can be a bit of a clash, and it can also be a sort of an internal kind of polarity depending on where these two planets fall in your chart. But needless to say, it can lead to overconfidence. It can make us sometimes overly optimistic, and just not necessarily make good judgment calls. So on top of that Venus-Neptune opposition, you know, this is also not really ideal for making important decisions, like life-changing decisions. Luckily, though, we've got Venus and Mercury making a conjunction to each other. So this is definitely an orb on the 25th. And, you know, these are the brother and sister planet, the sort of the siblings, if you like, the cosmic siblings, who sort of similar to Apollo and Athena, who really kind of rule our sort of our like our mental body, and also our sort of our attitudes to things like money, beauty, love, and that kind of thing, our values. So these two are coming together in the sign of Virgo. Mercury will be retrograde though, so that is just worth bearing in mind. So obviously it can, if you sort of like, if you want to sort of read it the way a lot of tarot card readers will read it on YouTube, it can sort of lead to sort of reconciliations or discussions with maybe people that we want to reunite with, or talks about reuniting. But equally it can be more about a kind of an internal union, if you like, of the mind and sort of, how can I put it, between the mind and the heart, I suppose is the best way to put it. So combining the sort of mercurial energy of kind of conversation, of thought and self-expression on the one hand, with our more kind of lofty pursuit of beauty, of love, of abundance, that kind of thing. So it can bring about opportunities for more harmonious conversations, for fun and stimulating social engagements. It can also engender in us a spirit of compromise and agreement, and sometimes that may not be a bad thing, especially when you've got a Sun-Jupiter opposition, which, as I say, can lead to sort of like standoffs and that kind of thing, people being quite opinionated. It's also great for harmonious interactions, for art, for anything to do with creativity, or with beauty, and getting clarity, and particularly about how to sort of combine, say, like health and beauty, or like beauty and utility. So for example, in design, like ergonomics along with something that looks beautiful. And we can also have a kind of refined appreciation of beauty and of the fine things in life because of that Virgo influence, which is so good at recognizing detail. There's also a helpful sort of aspect to Virgo, and that could also sort of come through in this combination. Venus will also be making a trine to Pluto, and so will Mercury the following day. And this, I think, speaks to some of the themes at the new moon of being able to be more honest, to stand in one's truth, to make like healthy changes that might not necessarily be easy to do. We might not necessarily always have the courage to make these kind of changes because they can be quite drastic. But with Pluto trining Venus and Mercury, I think we're kind of in a position to see what is actually healthy for us and what isn't, and to sort of cut away what isn't working. And that could be, habits, it could be attitudes, it could be people, places, or things, depending on your situation, and of course where Venus, Mercury, and Pluto sit in your chart. But nonetheless, it's about positive but far-reaching changes. Sometimes these can come from the outside. With Pluto, Pluto is one of the outer planets, so it does sometimes have a kind of a fated element to it. But nonetheless, I think it's also great for any kind of really honest conversations that you might need to have now with loved ones or colleagues, for example, where you need to sort of express yourself honestly, and also allow others to sort of express their truth in an honest but like heartfelt way, kind way, where kind of possible. And the same with the 27th when Mercury trines Pluto. I mean, this energy is essentially combined, with Venus, Mercury, and Pluto. So I think it will really allow us to be articulate on the one hand, diplomatic and charming on the other, and also still be very truthful and persuasive. It's interesting that Pluto can be quite persuasive. It's about kind of power in terms of like either in speech, so being able to persuade others using ideas, tone of voice. It can also be about persuasion through things like beauty. You like a presentation that sort of wows people, and has sort of elements of like art or beauty in it, that use music or whatever the case may be. Sometimes it can speak about sort of sexuality and people using sexual magnetism, for example, or the brilliance of their minds to sort of dazzle and to make an impression. And sometimes it also speaks of kind of psychological penetration or depth. in the sense of getting to the root of a psychological issue. Sometimes it can be about exposure, but I think this is quite a positive aspect. So it's more likely to be exposure in terms of maybe revealing truths about yourself that ordinarily you would feel too vulnerable to sort of like to do, and that can lead to sort of greater levels of intimacy or connection with others. So I think, definitely to be viewed in a positive light now, as we are moving through this new moon phase. And in fact, much of the energy of this last week of September, is really, really positive. So it should make for a positive and sort of a marked and improved change to some of the energies that we've had to kind of work through during September. So as we get to the 28th, we move to a trine between Mars and Saturn. So again, I've kind of mentioned this, this is really productive energy. This is the combining of Mars, which is all about physical energy, focus, and like go-getting spirit and initiative on the one hand, with the sort of discipline and endurance of Saturn. So we really can move mountains now, get around obstacles, and find ways through difficult circumstances or situations. So again, it should be really helpful if any issues come up with those oppositions on the 24th and the 26th. Very, very productive in terms of work. So, if you've got to kind of power through some difficult tasks that ordinarily, you might get bored with, or you might sort of lose steam, this is really the day to do it. And then on Thursday the 29th, Venus ingresses into her co-sign of Libra. So again, emphasizing the Libra energy of Libra season, which, began on the 23rd. So here Venus is much more focused on relationship, on dialogue, on reciprocity, harmony, peace, and creativity. So all the good things that Venus is sort of known for. And then we move into October. So on Saturday the 1st, Venus makes an opposition to Jupiter, and this is obviously in orb, sort of at the new moon itself, because Jupiter will be opposing the luminaries, and Venus and Mercury are not far behind. So this is Venus kind of catching up. So this is a combination of the benefics in a kind of way that can sometimes polarize. The opposition is the 180 degree opposition, and so you've got Venus in Libra on one hand and Jupiter in Aries on the other. So it can be about our values on one hand, and maybe we value relationship, we value peace, we value reciprocity, we value equality on the one hand, say, or justice. And then on the other hand, you've got Jupiter in Aries, which can be about self-belief. It can be about being maybe overly confident or arrogant. It can be about somebody who just wants to sort of expand for themselves, so like be a kind of like someone who's quite imperial, for example, or somebody who is very focused on self, like that whole kind of greed is good type of mentality that we, is famous from that movie called Wall Street. So these two things kind of pulling in opposite directions, and this can cause a sort of an internal conflict on the Saturday. So just something to be aware of. It can make us sometimes a little bit sort of like self-indulgent, or we can sort of feel polarized between wanting to sort of like look after ourselves, like self-care on one hand, but that can tip into selfishness, if we're not sort of like considerate. Then the following day on the 2nd, Mercury finally stations. So this is the end of Mercury retrograde, and that happens around about 10 a.m. In sort of British time. So obviously it will depend on what time zone you're in as to when that happens. But give Mercury a couple of days to recover, because very often, as it's turning direct from our perspective here on Earth, it does sometimes take a few days to kind of gain speed and start moving back in the opposite direction. So obviously this means that later in the month, on around about the 11th, Mercury is going to re-enter Libra, and so you could find that over this kind of week or 10 days that you've been given the opportunity to to put into action any past matter or situation, or sort of like agreement that you may have reviewed or changed, or edited whilst Mercury was kind of going back through that same part of the sort of last degrees of Virgo that it did at the beginning of September before it sort of retrograded. So there could be sort of things coming back now that you're now in a position to like fix, if you like, in inverted commas, between now and the 11th, when the focus shifts more to sort of diplomacy and peace talks and relationship, that kind of thing. And then the rest of the week is pretty uneventful. Not a lot happening until we get to the 7th or so, when the Sun will oppose Chiron. So this is, again, it can sort of coincide with like a pull between our ego and our conscious mind on one hand, and the desire to sort of heal on the other. Chiron being all about the sort of the wound, often the sort of like the wound from childhood or from puberty. But then, luckily, on the same day, we've got another iteration of that Mercury-Pluto trine that we had at the end of September. So this is because Mercury is now moving forward, so it's going back over the same part of the zodiac. So another opportunity, if you didn't sort of like manage to resolve or persuade somebody to your way of thinking at the end of September, to now like have another crack. So if you, for example, get a second job interview, maybe this time you'll kind of swing it. It's also great for, visiting psychologists, for speaking your truth, and as I say, for kind of persuading using powerful facts and arguments. And then the following day, Pluto stations. So an interesting one. We've got Mercury stationing followed by Pluto. As I say, a lot that's sort of in flux during October. So with Pluto stationing, the energy of that sort of Pluto retrograde shifts back into the outer world. So if we've spent the last few months thinking about the changes that we want to sort of make in our lives, we now get the opportunity over the next few months to actually put those into action in the outer world. We may also find fated events occurring that almost thrust these changes upon us, if you like. So that can sometimes happen with Pluto, depending on the transits and things that Pluto kind of undergoes over the next couple of months. And that's it, really. We then sort of move to the full moon on the 9th. So an interesting time in many respects. A lot kind of happening, but then a lot not happening. So it's like everything happens at once. It's kind of like buses, they all kind of come at once at the end of September, and then we have this sort of really uneventful couple of days, but in the first week of October, where not a lot happens at all. So I think it's kind of fits and starts, like spurts of activity, but a lot of what's happening, I think, is internal, and I think this fits very much with the themes of the new moon that I discussed in my forecast. So I hope that's been helpful, and that it gives you some heads up about some really good dates to kind of circle in your calendar. But anyway, all the best. Happy waxing moon, and I'll see you again around about October the 9th for the full moon forecast.